Welcome to the Horror Buzz. Today we're diving into a bone-chilling story straight from America's history. If you're a fan of the eerie and unexplained, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, share with your friends, and tap the bell icon so you never miss a tale. And in case we haven't met yet, I'm Charles, here to lead you through the shadows. In the heart of Philadelphia, the Eastern State Penitentiary stands as a stark reminder of America's evolving approach to prison reform. Built in 1829, it was intended to set a new standard for solitary confinement as a path to moral rehabilitation. However, the reality was far from its original purpose, as the intense isolation led to psychological distress rather than redemption. Decades after its closure in 1971, the legacy of Eastern State is not just its architecture, but also the stories of those who were trapped within its walls. It is believed that the spirits of former inmates still haunt its corridors, a testament to the enduring impact of their experiences. Today, as you explore the silent halls of this historic site, you can sense the echoes of the past. Each corner of the penitentiary offers a glimpse into a complex chapter of American history, where the lines between reform and punishment were blurred. Join us as we uncover the haunting stories of Eastern State Penitentiary, a place where history's lessons are written in the whispers of the ghosts that linger. Eastern State was the first prison in the world to enforce solitary confinement on a large scale, a practice believed to bring about penitence and redemption. The prison's design was revolutionary for its time. Each cell, a small, isolated chamber where inmates were kept in complete silence and isolation. There were no bars on the doors, no windows to the outside world, and no contact with other prisoners. The only light came from a small skylight, the eye of God, a constant reminder that they were always being watched. But the isolation that was meant to inspire reflection instead drove many prisoners to the brink of insanity. The lack of human contact, the deafening silence, and the oppressive atmosphere of the prison led to numerous cases of mental breakdowns. Guards reported hearing anguished cries in the night as the walls of their tiny cells closed in around them. The punishments at Eastern State were as brutal as the conditions. Inmates who broke the rules were subjected to horrific tortures that left them scarred for life. One of the most feared punishments was the iron gag, a device that clamped the prisoner's tongue and chained their hands behind their back. Any movement would tear at their tongue, causing excruciating pain. There were also reports of prisoners being dunked in icy water and left outside until their skin froze, or being strapped to a chair for days without food or water. But not all the horror at Eastern State was physical. The prison was also a place of dark, malevolent forces that seemed to feed on the suffering of the inmates. One of the most infamous prisoners to experience this was Robert the Whisperer Simmons. Convicted of a crime he swore he didn't commit, Simmons spent years in the cold, damp cell of Block 6. He was a quiet man who kept to himself. But soon after arriving at Eastern State, he began to hear voices, faint, whispering voices that seemed to come from the very walls of his cell. The whispers were soft at first, just a murmur in the background. But as the weeks turned into months, they grew louder, more insistent. They spoke to Simmons in a language he couldn't understand, but their meaning was clear. They wanted him to do something terrible. Simmons tried to resist, but the voices became his only companions in the endless solitude. He would sit for hours, listening to their insidious whispers, his mind slowly unraveling. One night, the guards heard Simmons screaming. When they reached his cell, they found him huddled in the corner, his eyes wide with terror. He was babbling incoherently, clutching his ears as if trying to shut out the voices, but there was nothing they could do to help him. The next morning, Simmons was gone, vanished without a trace. His cell door was still locked, panic swept through the prison, and a search was conducted, but he was never found. The only trace of him was the chilling whispers that continued to echo through Block 6, growing louder each night until one by one, the inmates of that block were driven mad. Some say Robert became one with the whispers, a shadow flitting from cell to cell, spreading his madness to all who crossed his path. Another inmate who fell victim to the dark forces at Eastern State was William Red Eyes Baker, a man feared by both prisoners and guards alike. Baker had been convicted of multiple murders, and there were rumors that he had sold his soul to the devil in exchange for power. His eyes were a disturbing shade of red, as if filled with blood, and he seemed to exude an aura of pure evil. Baker was placed in solitary confinement in the Hole, a series of underground cells reserved for the most dangerous prisoners. The Hole was a place of absolute darkness, where the air was thick with dampness and the smell of decay. It was said that no man could survive in the Hole for long without losing his mind. But Baker seemed to thrive in the darkness. He would sit in his cell for hours, staring into the void with his bloodshot eyes, as if communing with something unseen. Soon, strange things began to happen. Guards reported feeling an overwhelming sense of dread whenever they approached Baker's cell. The temperature would drop and faint growling sounds would emanate from the darkness. One night, a guard opened Baker's cell to find it empty. The chains that had bound him were broken, and the walls were covered in deep scratches, as if something had tried to claw its way out. The guard turned to leave, but before he could take a step, he felt a cold breath on the back of his neck and heard a low, menacing growl. He ran from the Hole, never to return. Baker wasn't gone. His presence lingered in the Hole, and visitors who dared to enter the underground cells reported seeing a pair of glowing red eyes staring at them from the darkness. Some claimed to have heard the same low growling that the guards had reported, while others felt an icy hand brush against their skin. Whatever haunted the Hole, it wasn't human. Eastern State Penitentiary was home to some of the most notorious criminals in history, including Al Capone. But even the most powerful men were not immune to the terror that lurked within the prison walls. During his 8-month stay at Eastern State, Capone was tormented by the ghost of James Jimmy Clark, one of the victims of the St. Valentine's Day massacre. Despite the luxury of his cell, furnished with fine rugs, a cabinet radio, and other comforts, Capone was plagued by nightly visits from Clark's vengeful spirit. Night after night, Capone would wake up screaming, his face pale with terror. He would beg Clark to leave him alone, but the ghost was relentless. The guards, hardened as they were unnerved by Capone's fear. They would hear him talking to the ghost, pleading for forgiveness, but Clark's spirit was not easily appeased. Capone's cries echoed through the prison, a chilling reminder that even in death, there is no escape from justice. Capone wasn't the only one to suffer. In the years since the prison's closure, countless visitors have reported terrifying encounters with the supernatural. They speak of shadowy figures that dart between cells, disembodied voices that call out from the darkness, and cold, clammy hands that seem to reach out from the walls. The most famous of these tales comes from Gary Johnson, a locksmith tasked with restoring one of the old cell doors in Block 4. As Johnson worked, he began to feel an overwhelming sense of dread. The air around him grew cold, and he had the distinct feeling that he was being watched. When he looked up, he saw a shadowy figure dart across the cell block. His heart raced, but he tried to focus on his work. But as soon as he opened the cell, a rush of icy air hit him, and the walls around him began to shimmer. Faces, twisted in agony, appeared on the walls, their eyes wide with terror, their mouths open in silent screams. Johnson was frozen in place, unable to move, as the faces seemed to reach out to him, begging for release. When he finally broke free from the trance, he ran from the cell block, vowing never to return. To this day, he swears that Eastern State is the most haunted place he's ever worked, a place where the souls of the damned are trapped, forever reliving their torment. Today, Eastern State Penitentiary stands as a museum, a testament to the dark history of America's prison system. But for those who dare to enter, it is much more than just a historical site. The spirits of the prisoners who suffered within its walls are still there, trapped in a never-ending cycle of pain and despair. Visitors report feeling an overwhelming sense of dread, hearing strange noises, and seeing figures out of the corner of their eye, figures that vanish when they turn to look. So if you ever find yourself in Philadelphia and you feel brave enough to walk the haunted halls of Eastern State Penitentiary, remember, you may not be walking alone. The shadows here have a way of clinging to the living, pulling them closer to the darkness that dwells within these walls. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and hit the bell icon for more chilling tales from the darkest corners of history. Sleep well if you can.